All right, let's talk about a true giant of history, an absolute titan, Michelangelo Buonarroti.
So what does it really take to become a legend? I mean, you look at his work and we just throw around words like divine or genius, but here's the thing. His life was not some story of effortless creation. Nope. It was a relentless, messy, and just profoundly human story of conflict, ambition, and nonstop struggle. But okay, before we get into the man himself, you've got to grasp the sheer mind-boggling scale of his legacy. We're talking about works that have basically defined Western art for more than 500 years.
You know, as a sculptor, he had this incredible idea. He said he could see a hero trapped inside a block of stone, and that his only job was to chip away the excess and set him free. Just wow.
And then there's his painting. And the crazy part, he claimed he hated painting. And yet he takes this huge, blank ceiling and transforms it into the story of creation itself. It's a work that, even today, just humbles every single person who stands underneath it.
And then, in his final years, he became an architect, and he literally reached for the heavens, designing that magnificent, iconic dome for St. Peter's Basilica.
So you see these masterpieces, right? But who is the man behind them? To really get the art, you have to get the artist. And believe me, he was a man who was just as complex, difficult, and flawed as he was brilliant.
So let's go back to his early life, and see how his path was forged, not through encouragement, but through pure, stubborn defiance.
Okay, so picture this. Michelangelo was born into a noble Florentine family, but they'd fallen on hard times. And for them, a respectable son went into public office. That was the path. So his passion for art, they saw it as a total source of shame, a mechanical trait, a huge step down for a family desperately clinging to its social status.
But Michelangelo saw it differently. This quote really says it all. See, he was sent to a wet nurse in a town called Settignano, which was full of stonecutters. He always claimed that his destiny was sealed right there from birth, that he drank, in his words, milk mixed with marble dust.
Man, his youth was just a total whirlwind. First, he has to fight his own father just to become an apprentice. Then, he gets taken under the wing of the most powerful man in Florence, Lorenzo de' Medici, only to have that entire world collapse when Lorenzo dies. And then, political chaos forces him to flee the city. You can see how all this would shape him into a resilient, but also a deeply suspicious person, right?
So now, let's talk about how this young, ambitious artist really announced himself to the world. And it starts with, believe it or not, a really clever trick.
So when he was in his early 20s, he carved this statue of a sleeping Cupid. But here's the kicker. He then artificially aged it and buried it, all to pass it off as an ancient Roman artifact. The hoax was so convincing, it actually fooled a powerful cardinal. And when the cardinal found out it was a fraud, he wasn't even mad. He was so impressed by the skill that he summoned Michelangelo straight to Rome.
And that incredibly audacious move, it totally paid off. Because in Rome, just get this, 24 years old, he unveiled the Pietà. It was a work of such impossible perfection, such refined beauty, that people literally refused to believe someone that young could have made it. That piece sealed his reputation. Forever.
So when he got back to Florence, he took on what everyone thought was an impossible challenge. There was this massive block of marble that two other sculptors had already tried and failed to work on. It had been sitting there, abandoned, for decades. People just called it the giant. But where everyone else saw a ruined stone, Michelangelo, he saw David. And from that ruined block, he carved the most famous statue on earth, a powerful symbol of his city's defiance.
Well, after the David, his fame was just unavoidable, and it brought him to the attention of the truly formidable Pope Julius II, a man who would hand him the greatest and maybe the most dreaded commission of his entire life.
Okay, this brings us to a really important word for understanding Michelangelo, terribilia. It's this Italian term that describes both the awe-inspiring, almost terrifying power in his work and also his own intimidating, difficult personality. And you can really see this play out with the Sistine Chapel. Remember, Michelangelo saw himself as a sculptor. He disliked painting. So why give him this job? Well, a lot of people think it was a trap set by his rivals who were just hoping to watch the great sculptor fail miserably at a painter's task.
But he refused to fail. For 4 agonizing years, he just toiled. He was often lying on his back, with paint dripping into his eyes, battling leaky roofs and a pope who was notoriously demanding.
And he transformed 500 square meters of plaster into an epic story that totally redefined the limits of what human creativity could even do.
You know, his own words really capture the cost of it all best. He wrote a whole sonnet just describing the physical torment of the project, talking about how the work was literally deforming his body. It's just this raw, incredible testament to the immense personal sacrifice that it took to create this masterpiece.
All right, let's fast forward to his later years and take a look at the complex, contradictory man who became a living legend.
And this is the thing, right? His immense success never, ever brought him peace. The man amassed a fortune worthy of a prince, but he lived like a pauper in total squalor. He was a man of deep, tormented religious faith, yet his nudes in the Last Judgment were called heretical. He was just a person of profound and constant contradictions.
I mean, he achieved something pretty much no one had before, total mastery in all three major arts. But for him, they were all connected. He really believed that the best art was the kind that copied the divine act of creation itself. Didn't matter if you were carving stone away or adding paint to a ceiling.
And this is where we really get the clearest glimpse into his soul. As he got older, his poetry became his most intimate form of expression. It reveals a man just grappling with his sins, with his art, and with this desperate hope for some kind of divine grace.
This line from one of his poems, it just captures his entire existence perfectly. A double struggle. Think about that. It was the lifelong battle between his ambition and his faith, between his art and his spirit, between the human and the divine.
So, in the end, was it genius? Was it faith? Or was it just this endless struggle? What was the true driving force behind the divine Michelangelo? You know, maybe it wasn't just one thing. Maybe it was the powerful, unending conflict between all of those things that fueled his torment, his ambition, and ultimately his immortal legacy.